Hi everybody, and welcome back to my YouTube channel, American Viscountess. I'm Julie Montague, the American Viscountess, and this channel really consists of me obviously going out to historic houses. So hopefully you've been able to watch that series above, but also vlogging about my life here at Mapperton and what it's like marrying into the British aristocracy. So this video is really all about that it's not all Downton Abbey. So I'm gonna start by answering some of your questions. So the first time I came to Mapperton, my husband somewhat prepared me in so much that he said, just so you know, we're going to kind of the family home, and I just want to let you know that it's kind of big. And I'm like, okay, well, I come from the land of supersized, so no problem with, you know, how big it is. I'm thinking, it's probably just like a big American house. I'm used to big, I'm used to supersize. But when we drove down the drive, what he didn't tell me was that it was a historic house. And it is, of course, very large historic house. These country houses were built with a plan to basically entertain, and everything happened in the house. He didn't tell me, though, that it was 500 years old. So the first part of the house was built in the 1540s. The library, the drawing room, the great chamber, that's where we have all the Tudor ceilings. He didn't tell me any of that. So getting my head around not only the history of the house, but of course, the history of his family. I learned about not only the first Earl of Sandwich, where the title firstly presented itself and was given to the family by Charles II. Edward Montague was a great naval officer. He was head of the Admiralty, and he used to be fighting for the Cromwells. He was part of the Cromwellian army, and then switched sides and became a royalist. So he was very instrumental in the restoration, and he went on a secret mission, heading the ship over to Holland to pick up Charles II from exile and bring him back over to England, where Charles was crowned King of England. And that was the beginning of the restoration. So he was given the title of an Earl, and he was able to pick what he wanted to be Earl of. Sandwich at that period was a great naval port in Kent. And so he chose Sandwich, a port sort of that would distinguish him from everybody else. So he became the Earl of Sandwich. Now, of course, the favorite snack that we all eat, the sandwich, was named after my husband's ancestor, but that was much later on. And that was the fourth Earl of Sandwich. And the rumor is, I'm gonna give you the truth here. So listen closely. The rumor is that it was named a sandwich because the fourth Earl liked to gamble. And so at one of his late night gambling sessions, he asked his butler to bring him a piece of roast beef, but put it between two pieces of bread so that his cards wouldn't get greasy. I'm going to tell you the truth right now, so get ready. We believe he was such a great politician and, of course, head of the Admiralty and very, very busy that he was working at his desk all of the time, that sometimes he didn't eat and leave his desk and eat lunch in the dining room or elsewhere. And so he asked his butler to bring him roast beef between two pieces of bread so he wouldn't get his papers greasy. That, you've heard it here first. Now that doesn't mean that he didn't gamble and didn't also, of course, have that sandwich next to him when he was gambling, but we believe that the true story comes from the fact that he didn't want to get his very important papers greasy. And that is where the sandwich that we know today actually comes from. Unfortunately, we didn't trademark that, so, so yes, that was a real loss. What's extraordinary about these historic houses is that the ones that we see today, we know that they've gone through a lot in order to survive. So after or during the Second World War, many, and I mean many, historic houses were requisitioned by the government to be used by the government, whether they were prisoner of war camps or they were maternity hospitals or they were Red Cross centers, or even refugee camps. But a really good example is Pentilly Castle, which I did visit. Hopefully you've been able to see those 3 episodes of Pentilly Castle in my American Viscountess series on historic houses. But that was requisitioned by the government, and it was used as a maternity hospital during the Second World War. And when I went to go visit Sammy Corriton, who now owns and runs Pentilly Castle, she taught me how to do hospital corners, because now Pentilly Castle is a wonderful venue that you can rent out for weddings, for any type of events, and Sammy and her family run it. But we had a wonderful scene where Sammy was showing me how to do hospital corners, because of course that's what they were doing during the Second World War when Pentilly Castle was used for a maternity hospital. After the Second World War, when these homeowners came back to their houses, these historic houses, they found that they were in such a state that they couldn't repair them. They had no money, also because all the taxes that were put on these landowners, these homeowners. You were taxed for the size of your house, you were also taxed for the amount of land that you used, and these homeowners couldn't afford to pay these taxes. They arrived back into their houses, and some found that their staircases, their beautiful historic staircases, were chopped up to be used for firewood. Their paintings, Van Dyck's, were used for dartboards. And so many of the houses were either just demolished so that they didn't have to pay taxes, or their land was sold, or they just left them in ruin, or they sold them to become museums, to become schools, to become prisons, believe it or not. And Pentilly is also another example that in the 1960s, 2 huge wings of Pentilly Castle were just completely demolished. But the same thing happened over here. Hinchingbrook, which is actually my title and was the family home, that is the home that the first Earl of Sandwich lived in all of his life, and all of the other earls after that, up until my husband's grandfather. He sold Hinchingbrook. Again, same reason, right after the Second World War, taxes. In fact, he even knocked down a wing. But luckily, Hinchingbrook did survive. It's now a school, so it's a wonderful school, and that means that all of Hinchingbrook is still intact as far as the extraordinary architecture around that. After the Second World War, but probably not quite in time, this country set up something around grade 1 and grade 2 listed buildings. Mapperton is a grade 1 listed building. Hinchingbrook House is a grade 1 listed building, and it means that it's of extraordinary historical interest. So that is what grade 1 means. If you're wondering what grade 2 means, it's of special historical interest. So both Hinchingbrook and Mapperton are grade 1 listed, which means we cannot bulldoze it down ever, and it also means we actually can't even take out a wall if we want to expand. That's how strict the rules have become in order to preserve this part of England's heritage. So it's actually a good thing. First time I wore a hat was at Hinchingbrook. It was the 200th anniversary of the Battle of Trafalgar. It was the 21st of October, 1805, and 200 years later, in 2005, I planted a tree at Hinchingbrook, because custom goes is that it was always, when trees were to be planted, it was always the lady of the house who would plant the tree. And granted, we weren't living there, but it is called Hinchingbrook House. My title is Viscountess Hinchingbrook, and so I wore a very smart hat, and I was able to plant that tree. So I was able to plant a tree there, and it was really special and a wonderful moment for me. So that was really the first time, almost the last time, that I wore a hat. However, if you watched my recent video where I went to Plymouth and retraced kind of the steps of the Pilgrims and the Mayflower in particular, I was wearing this hat, and this hat actually comes from, we believe, Luke's great-grandmother, Alberta Sturgis, who was the 9th Countess of Sandwich, but also an American like me. She came over during the Gilded Age, just like Downton Abbey, was here during that same period, married in 1905, brought her money, exchanged it for a title, and I'll be doing my dissertation on Alberta Sturgis, but we believe that this was her hat, and I was able to wear it for that video. Many of you watched the video that I did with my husband, how not to set the table. Listen, honestly, it's difficult. It still gets me today. As you can see, we have different opinions on how both my husband and I should lay the table. He thought what I did was an absolute disaster. I thought it was all right. He thought I Googled it. I don't know, I'm gonna keep mum on that one. But I still, again, etiquette at the table, learning how to set the table, it's difficult. It's because setting the table, you have to figure out how many courses you're having, how many just different glasses you need. Are you having cheese? Are you gonna have pudding? Are you gonna have salads? Are you gonna have soups? And these all require different cutlery for sure. So, and actually I should say silverware, because over in this country, your everyday utensils that you eat are called cutlery. Only when you're having a smart dinner and you're actually using silver would it be called silverware, whereas in America, I'm afraid, everything's called silverware. So that's another one. So learning the etiquette, I'm still getting my head around that, but I will end with one faux pas that I had, and that was passing the salt. So somebody at a smart dinner party asked me to pass the salt, and the salt was right there in the middle of the table. I grabbed the salt, stood up, and passed it over to the person across the table, and that was a shh, never do that. So what you have to do is you have to, I believe, pass the salt. Well, it's to the right. So I think it's I think it depends on how close that person is. So if the person across from me was, 3 away, but yet 6 away there, I could pass it to the left. But also if all of a sudden it's 3 away here and there were 6 on this side, I would pass it to the right. I think if it's equidistant, you would go to the right. But don't hold me to that. But you cannot pass across the table anything, not just salt. Water, wine, whatever it is, gravy, you cannot pass it across the table. You need to pass it one by one. And with that, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please be sure to comment down below. Let me know any faux pas that you've had, if you've been over at a smart dinner party, whether it's here in Britain or around the world. Let me know if you've ever worn a hat before, and I would love to hear that. And let me know if you've ever made a faux pas addressing anybody with a title. Do comment down below. I love hearing about all your comments. Make sure you subscribe to this channel, and do be sure to check out lots of my other channels as well. Bye, everybody.